Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Katarina Martens from the DMCC marketing team. I'm delighted to welcome you all today and thank you for joining us this morning to our webinar, Going Virtual, the Key to Business Success, in partnership with Bayt.com. In today's session, you will find out how your team can efficiently work from home and help your business to grow. In case you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A tab to raise them, and we will answer them at the end of the session. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the copy will be shared post-event. And now, without further delaying, I will hand over to Mr. Rabea Ataya, CEO of Bayt.com.
Good morning, everyone. Give me just a second to make sure my screen comes up and we'll get started. I hope my screen is visible right now. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. As a starting point, just some background. So I've been running Bayt.com now for just about 20 years. We, in fact, are the longest running internet business in the Middle East. But prior to Bayt.com, I started my career in Dubai in 1995. I had just finished a couple of years experience in an investment bank in the United States. And I decided to come join the family business, which was in construction at the time. And immediately upon joining, there was a contraction in the construction market, which revealed that one of the managers in my father's business had in fact defrauded the business for tens of millions of dirhams. And as a 23-year-old boy at the time, my very first experience was dealing with that crisis of having to try and unwind a company that had been put into a massive amount of debt, and where we had everything from suppliers knocking on my door every day to bankers wanting to foreclose, to staff walking in and complaining that they hadn't been paid. And so this was a formative experience for me. We lived through the global financial crisis, we've lived through the Arab Spring, and we've lived through various oil crises, revolutions, rebellions, and changes of governments across the region. So I guess as I lived through this crisis, I realized that I've lived, to quote the Chinese proverb, in interesting times. And the Chinese proverb is meant to be a bit of a curse, may you live in interesting times. But in each one of these crises, I've learned a lot. And what I'm obviously tremendously grateful for is the fact that not only have we survived each of these crises, but in each case, we've grown and become better. And so today, I just wanted to share actually personal experiences. I didn't want to make this a philosophical conversation or a theoretical one, but really to talk about actual practical things that we've been doing within our organization in order to become a lot more effective and efficient, and in order to come out of this stronger than what we went into it. And so as a starting point, I just want to remind you all that this too shall pass. So every crisis, no matter how bad it looks, is something that we will pass through, and there will be massive opportunities as a result of having passed through it. And so the question we all have to ask ourselves is, how will we come out of this, and what will we have done during this time to come out stronger? In fact, I just heard a speaker the other day who spoke about when there's a really strong wind out there, you have one of two choices, either to go into your home and hunker down and lock yourself in, or to go out and build windmills. And I guess the challenge for all of us right now is to think about what windmills we're gonna build as the winds of this crisis blow through. So I'm going to share with you 5 specific tips that we've adopted as an organization, and I'm going to give you actually practical tools that we've adopted, and then I'm looking forward to your questions and answers. The first step is I found that in every single crisis, the single most important thing to do is to over-communicate. And there's a reluctance of people in general when things are bad to go out and speak about it. And generally, we live a lot in our own brains. But crises are times when we really have to think about being in continuous touch with those around us. The communication helps us set direction. So by having that conversation, everyone becomes clear about what we're trying to achieve. It gets everyone aligned once the direction is set so that people know what their specific objectives are and what they have to achieve. It allows preparation, and there's a ton of preparation to be done at these times. And very importantly, it generates comfort. The fact that people are speaking to each other, human beings get a tremendous amount of comfort from listening to the experiences of others, from hearing about the challenges, and from being truthful to each other. And I found that as a leader, it's very important for me to always be out there conversing and talking about my own challenges and my own discomfort and sometimes my own confusion. And very importantly, it can help reinforce positivity at these times. So we hear a lot about over-communicating, and oftentimes the question is, how do you do that? And what is considered over-communication? And I think it's very important to ritualize communication, to have a certain pattern to it that's repetitive, that people can depend on and almost time their clocks by. So what we've done in our organization is everyone in the company twice a day is involved in a daily huddle with their immediate team. This is a minimum of 2 times a day. This is above and beyond the point one-on-one conversations, but this is actually a team meeting. In my case, I meet with 8 people, my direct reports, twice a day, once just before 1 o'clock at 12:45 and one at 5:45. The meeting is timed, it's exactly 15 minutes. It waterfalls through the organization, so every manager has it with their own team. And the flow of this always starts with us sharing good news. And again, this goes back to sharing positivity. It's really important that people realize, even in this time of crisis, there's good coming out of it. And that good news can be business related, but it could also be very personal. It could be something like, I've been looking for tomatoes for the last 2 days, and today I was able to get some. Or it might be, I just bagged a large new customer, and this is how I did it. And I found that good news builds on itself. After we get through the good news, everyone shares their main KPI. So everyone in our organization has a key performance indicator, a key metric they're trying to achieve. We then talk about our main item to achieve over the next few hours and the main items that we've concluded. And this basically makes us feel like we're all in the same space. Everyone's always aware where every other member of the team is and what they're doing. And that keeps a tremendous sense of alignment in the organization. Beyond the daily huddles that are happening very regularly, we have instituted, ever since the crisis began, a daily coffee break. This takes the place of our team hanging around the water cooler or the coffee machine in our canteen, and allows for casual conversation where the team comes together and reinforces culture and connection. We do our daily coffee break every day at 3 o'clock. It lasts for 30 minutes, and it's done on Zoom. And it's a company-wide conversation where anyone who wants to can come in and bring up anything. It is voluntary, but to give you an idea, over 50% of our team actually show up on a coffee break every day. So we have over 150 people who might show up on any particular day to this conversation. And the content has been tremendously varied. It's been everything from how I get my groceries these days, to what is it that I'm not finding, to how is it that we're trying to stay fit, to how do we stay productive. And in fact, there's even been lots of comparison of national situations. So we as Bayt are spread across 14 different cities across the globe. And every day it's interesting just to compare how the different countries that we operate in have reacted to the financial crisis and how each of our team members has reacted. I just ran a survey across my organization after a few weeks of doing this, asking if they felt this was valuable and if we should continue doing it. And over 90% of the staff responded that this was both valuable and something that we should continue to do. So again, this is just an important way for people to feel connected in this time of crisis. We're also doing regular town hall meetings, and a town hall meeting is different than a daily huddle or a coffee break. This is a chance for senior management to actually broadcast company-wide information. We as a company are even though we're privately held, we like to expose our entire team to our financial results. We like to make sure everyone knows where we're heading to and what we're doing. And we like to celebrate success across the organization. And so this is a great opportunity to recalibrate where the organization is going. And I think, oftentimes the leadership in the organization believes the team knows what's going on, but unless we are having regular broadcasts, particularly as everyone's in their own home, the information will not travel by osmosis. It actually has to be regularly broadcast to everyone. So I guess, again, step number one, a crisis requires a massive amount of communication. And the way we've done this beyond the day-to-day communication is by daily huddles, by coffee breaks, and by regular town hall meetings. And that's helped us tremendously stay together as a company. The second recommendation is to remember to put people first. Obviously, for all of our organizations, people are at the root of those organizations. They're what make it operate, they're what make it succeed. And one of my favorite quotes is one by Peter Drucker, where he talks about culture eating strategy for breakfast. At a time like this, far more important than strategy is culture, is the ability of people even at a distance to work together and to operate effectively and to be proactive and to be positive and to actually live the company values. And so how do you practically put people first? Well, for us as a starting point, as soon as the crisis started, we asked all the leaders in the organization to put their teams down into sort of three primary buckets. The first bucket are those who are currently still, even with this crisis, highly productive and they're long-term culture fit. They're people that we would want on our side no matter what. And our objective is to make sure that we take care and pamper these people as much as humanly possible. And I guess even if you're listening to this and you're not in the leadership of the organization, think about which of those buckets you're placing yourself in, because your leadership is probably also thinking this way. The second bucket are those who can't be productive right now, because many things, let's say you're in retail and your salesperson can't actually be in the store anymore. Or let's say you have a driver who's no longer able to drive, or a salesman who's no longer able to sell. But again, there are many of those who are massive cultural fits, who have been productive before, and you want them to be by your side when this is over. And again, this will be over. And so the point with those is also to think about how to retain them, not to be short-sighted in terms of just headcount cuts with them, but to look at, are there other things that we can do with them to increase their productivity or to manage their cost? And I'll cite one example with us. One part of our business is facing extreme challenges right now, but there's another part of our business which is in the virtual event. It's a virtual event platform, which is picking up tremendous steam. And what we've done is we've taken some of our best salespeople who are no longer able to sell our traditional products and realigned them to this new product. And they've done phenomenally well. The transition has been very easy because they understand the culture, they understand the company, and we know them to be key players. The third bucket, and there's in every organization, there are people, unfortunately, in this bucket, are those that aren't productive right now, and they're not a culture fit. They're people that you realize are working with you just because, that's the way it happened, but they weren't adding much value beforehand, nor are they likely to add much value in the long run. And I think this is a crisis like this is a time to ensure the fact that the C players are no longer in the organization. And though that's a very difficult thing to do, today that is the right thing to do given how challenged everyone is. Beyond the productivity and cultural classification, it's important to also divide the roles in the team. And I'll be a bit more specific about this. I find that human beings are generally not great at multitasking mental activities. We're in fact a lot better at multitasking physical than mental activities. And so at a crisis like this, there's always some defensive work to be done, and there's always some offensive work to be done. And the defensive work is just ensuring the fact that your cash is protected, your expenses that are unnecessary are minimized, and that you're protected from a legal and financial perspective. The offense is thinking about what opportunities are there and how do we pursue them. So what we did as soon as this crisis started is we actually divided our team into defense and offense. Myself, our CFO, and our head of HR are day in, day out looking at legal issues, financial issues, personnel issues, and thinking about how to protect the position of the company. And while we speak regularly to our chief commercial officer, our CTOs, our head of technology, and our head of marketing, the job of the CCO, CTO, and CMO is to go out and generate new opportunities and actually lean into the business and find growth. And so they're thinking the whole time about new products, new customer acquisition, relationship management, and we try not to burden them at all with conversations about potentially reducing headcount or potentially reducing expenses. Their job is to go out there and be positive and proactive and bring back good news. I find that's worked throughout every crisis I've been in tremendously well, because if everyone is working on defense, the company naturally contracts and oftentimes dies. And if everyone is working in offense, the same can happen where everyone's just getting too optimistic and ahead of themselves, and they're not dealing with the immediate issues at hand. So a very clear line across the organization I found to be a helpful way to tackle business. So now we've talked about communication and communicating intensely. We've talked about putting people first. If you remember, I said I'll give 5 sort of tips. We're on number 3, which is deploying technology as an enabler. Now we're lucky as Bayt. We're a technology-based business, and we've been distributed across, as I mentioned earlier, 14 different cities for many, many years. And so some things we take for granted, but I'll bring them up anyway as important enabling tools right now. So one of the enabling tools is obviously, and more important every day, is communication technology. We communicate across multiple mediums at all times. So we, for example, are continually have our Google Hangouts chat on and are sharing information in real time with each other on that. And that's literally anyone to anyone. So the lowest paid person at Bayt.com can still reach out to the highest paid person or the most senior person and have a conversation about anything at any time. We've created multiple WhatsApp groups. We're all on email. We also get on Zoom for our very large meetings. We've used Skype for Business. We use a tool called Workplace by Facebook to celebrate various things that happen across the organization. So we've basically not held back on any technology medium that helps us to bring down the boundaries of communication. And that's been an extremely important competitive advantage for us, and no more so than today, when everyone's at a distance. But we also, beyond the communication tools, use a lot of collaboration tools. And in fact, everything we do at Bayt can be done remotely. So I, as the CEO of the business, continually have a lot of documents to sign. And I rarely, if ever, have to print out a document to sign it. My signing is done using online signing technology. Our accounting is all on the cloud. Our HR has been on the cloud for many years. When I'm on a Google chat or talk with someone or on a Zoom call, we practically always have Google Sheets or Google Docs online, and we're looking at the same document at the same time and collaborating and amending it at the same time. And all of our KPIs are shared with everyone in the organization through online sharing mediums. And so, I think the recommendation here is the less boundaries there are to information flowing, the more effective we all become as an organization. And we found, again, in a very fast moving industry like the internet, we've been around for 20 years and have been able to adapt and survive. In fact, living much longer than most internet businesses globally, because we keep the boundaries to communication very, very low and allow anyone to reach out to anyone with a large number of tools. Now, beyond technology as a collaboration and communication tool or a business enabler, it's also an important business disruptor. I've tried to never let a crisis go to waste. In fact, practically every business I've started has been at times of crisis. So I started Bayt, as I said, during the .com bubble bursting. When the global financial crisis happened, we launched a business called Go Nabbit, which grew very quickly and was sold. We also launched a business called Mom's World, which today is doing extremely well, expanding rapidly. It's an e-commerce business for moms and kids that has just almost exploded in terms of demand when this current crisis hit. During the sort of 2015 oil crisis, we launched a platform called VFairs, which is a virtual event platform. And think of it as going to, for example, the World Trade Center, but virtually, where different companies can have different stands and avatars, and you can communicate. And we're continually thinking about, in terms of crisis, when the cost of starting a business is low, when the cost of talent is low, when regulators are very, very, very cooperative, to actually invest in those times in new technologies that can grow in the future. And so while we launched VFairs in 2015 or 16, when things didn't look that positive, and it's done fairly well as a business up until now, in the last 3 months, we've had again, massive increase in demand. And just to put that into perspective, March was, we had 6 times the revenue that we had in February, and April looks to be a similar multiplier on March. And so taking times of crisis as an opportunity to look at new business opportunities, particularly ones that leverage technology, I find is generally a brilliant idea. And in fact, we're doing a lot to even the existing job site business that's been around for 20 years. This is a time to leverage technology as a disruptor. So just yesterday, we launched on Bayt a new category of jobs called remote. There was never a need to have remote jobs before that. But now more and more of us want to work remotely, and more employers want to hire people remotely. And so we've proceeded with allowing for advertising jobs as remote, or for a job seeker to say that they want to work remotely. We've offered free job postings to people who are frontline workers in this crisis, such as healthcare workers. We've gone out there and provided a lot of tools for job seekers to assess themselves through tests and others for free during this time in order to better improve their skills. So again, the thinking right now is this is a crisis, but crises generate opportunity. And we want to make sure that we are helping our community and ourselves obviously come out of this a lot stronger than we went into it. The last and final tip that I'll share with you is about taking this time to reorganize your business. And again, practically, how do you do this? We are having conversations across the organization, and I have them at least once a day with people at all levels of the organization. And we call these conversations stop, start, or keep. And what the stop, start, keep is what are the practices that we used to have before this crisis that we should now stop and probably never come back to? For example, we have some offices that actually we realize that we probably won't need in the long run. And with that comes some business licenses that we won't need. And there are, in fact, some tech tools that for years we kept on paying for that we realize we hardly use. And so if you have this conversation often, you find that there are lots of efficiencies that you can produce within the organization. So that's the stop part. The start part is, again, there are tons of opportunities that show themselves at the time of pause like this. And we've realized, again, that there's a lot of tools that we needed, that we didn't have, that would serve us in the long run. And so having a conversation about what we should start has been important, as well as what we should keep. And these are the practices that we used to do and that we should continue doing. But I invite you all within your organizations to have these as a framework for your one-on-one talks. And I find that if you're having this with all of your employees, a ton of amazing innovation comes out of it, which helps the organization becomes a lot leaner and stronger. So again, to recap, some of the experiences that have helped us survive over 2 decades of crisis in this region. One is, at a time of crisis, communicate more than ever. Communicate intensely and through ritualized communication. Don't just depend on, well, we speak to each other all the time. Actually have scheduled communications that repeat themselves. Put people at the forefront of what you're going to do. You want to have your best people still with you through this crisis and beyond that, and don't forget to take care of them, while at the same time ensuring the fact that if there are resources that you don't need, you manage those out, and that you divide your team into a team that is on defense and another team that's on offense. Use technology both as an enabler to help you communicate and function at this time, as well as a disruptor. And as a disruptor, I mean as the way forward for your business. And then look at regularly thinking about how to make the business more efficient. And a great tool we found for that is the start, stop, keep conversations. Thank you.
You like my hair?
So that's my daughter who's chosen to walk in.
Thank you, Rabea, so much for the helpful recommendations. We're moving now to the Q&A session. Please use the Q&A tab where you can raise all your questions.
I'm trying to bring up the Q&A tab on my screen. Sorry, I apologize. I'm unable to see the Q&A tab. So what I'm going to do...
Click the button, Q&A.
I clicked it. I'm going to go back to...
I can read you the questions.
Perfect. If you can read me the questions, that would be tremendously helpful.
So
here we go. So there's 3 questions.
Yeah.
So if you have everyday these meetings, this is from an anonymous attendee who's asking if we have these meetings every time, what time do you have to work? So let me frame this actually. So if I have 2 daily huddles of 15 minutes each, that's half an hour a day. And if I have a coffee break for half an hour, that's another half an hour, that's an hour. I still have 8 working hours in the day. And I have found that if I've done the huddles and the coffee breaks, I'm less likely to be interrupted throughout the day with other conversations or other meetings that pop out of nowhere. So the fact that the meeting is ritualized actually saves me a tremendous amount of time and effort on unscheduled meetings. So, you know, we have a tremendous amount of time to work, and that's because we do ritualize the meeting. The next question is from Muhammad Ijaz, and I'm going to just read them in order. We have some employees since the company was working at a small scale. However, now the company is big. But these employees who were very productive when the company was small are not as productive compared to new employees. Old employees are also getting higher salaries. Due to their attachment to the company, organization is keeping them, but is creating unsatisfaction with new employees. Please advise how to deal with this issue. Yeah, Muhammad, it's a great question and one that I struggle with all the time. And I wish I had a very easy answer. I think it is the job of every individual in the company, as well as the company itself, to always be looking in the future. And so for all of us, myself included as a CEO and owner of the company, the past does not guarantee that I keep my job for the future. I could have, for the last 20 years, weathered 100 different crises. But again, this crisis might bankrupt me if I'm not careful and I don't work hard. So I think when you're talking about people first, you need to prioritize those people who are going to be with you in the future and are going to still be productive with you in the future. And I think that's important for the well-being of the company and the well-being of the top performers in the company. James asks, you have about 1 hour of meetings per day. Is that productive, or could it be cut down to beginning and end of the week? So James, again, we found it's tremendously productive. I personally hate meetings, and I was very reluctant when I started these daily huddle schedules. But again, if you're disciplined about having a time to them, and having the time that they're held, you will actually find that you are having less meetings than you've typically had. And far less time is on that, and the organization works a lot more efficiently. So 1 hour of meetings a day, actually, when you measure it against what you're probably having in meetings a day, is not a lot. And in this time in particular, again, my recommendation is if you're not communicating very, very regularly, you probably don't know if your team is being productive or not. And you're probably not aligning enough. So another attendee asked about, what about the company cash flow? So great question. And that's why I talked about having part of the team in offense and part in defense. So the team that is in defense has to worry about cash flow. And they're the ones who have to worry about, you know, in relation to these start-stop conversations, do we really still need that office? Do we still need that expense? Do we actually need that headcount that we've had when times were good? And their job is to manage cash flow. And so cash flow is a problem for everyone right now. And again, I have found that that's the beauty of a crisis, is in good times, everyone seems to be doing well, but a crisis really forces everyone to be a lot more efficient and to run a business the way it should be run, which is worrying about profitability and cash flow. So we as a company have had to take difficult decisions with regards to cash flow, and we continue to take them. To date, We have not had layoffs, so we've been very grateful for not having to do that, and I'm hoping we'll be able to avoid that altogether. But that being said, again, there have been unproductive team members who were not productive prior to this, who, again, we do not see as cultural fits, who we have asked to leave. Now, they would have left in the normal course of business anyway. This has sort of been just an accelerated version of it. Siddhi Joshi asks, how do you identify the cultural health of an organization? Siddhi, for us, we as a company have a set of values and a mission and a vision that define us as a company. We hire for those values. So when we interview, we ask people questions that relate to it. We train people on those values when they join, and then we reward them on the values on an ongoing basis. And so for us, it's fairly easy to identify the cultural health because we've got a set of principles we can measure against, and they're called our cultural values. And this is similar like to a set of religious beliefs. How would you determine if someone is a good Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever? You have a set of tenets within that religion, and then you can say, does that person live by these tenets? And so we have a set of principles that define Bayt as a company and employees of it, and we measure against that. If you do not have that type of document in place, or those type of principles, I strongly recommend you also take this opportunity to define those. There's no better time than a time of crisis to define the company values and mission and vision. Alex asks, if we work with retailers who are closed for the moment, how can we work with them as they're completely closed? Alex, it's a great question. We also serve a very large number of retailers. In fact, most of the large retailers in the region recruit through Bayt. And obviously, a lot of them are not currently recruiting. What we found is important is that we've asked all of our relationship managers to still call our customers regularly and check in on them as people, and also to ask them about what challenges they're facing. And again, even in such difficult times, there's opportunities to be had. So for example, a lot of these retailers right now aren't very interested in recruiting, but they may be interested in outplacement services, which we offer, which is how to transition their staff from being full-time employees to not, right? And so I guess the question for you is, once you have a relationship with someone and they trust you and they want to work with you, what other opportunities are there for you to work together? And it might be that you don't find these opportunities, but I find there's no time like the present to have a very active dialogue with all retailers. Mr. Rao asks, I completely support your point, take the opportunity during this time. Can you give me a couple of areas where we would look into opportunities to capitalize? Rao, again, this really is dependent on your business and your capabilities. So I would say that as opposed to me sharing opportunities such as, oh, how about online education, which might not be something you are prepared for, your best bet is to speak with your team members, your shareholders, your customers, your suppliers, and to ask them about what opportunities they feel would be good for you to pursue. They know you a lot better, and they probably have a pretty good idea about what you can be good at. And this goes back to, again, this concept of communicating intensely. There's no time like the present to actually reach out to everyone and to have conversations, because these conversations will define your future. Mr. Srinivas Singh asks, what do you do if employees are not flexible to change? You know, one of our company values, Mr. Singh, is flexibility. And we tell all of our employees when they join that the only way we could survive in a business that is technology-based, that is changing constantly, and in a region that has had its fair share of crisis, is to be massively flexible. And we let everyone know that if they are not flexible, they're likely to be left behind. Now, what flexibility doesn't mean is you accept absolutely everything, but it does mean that when a change does come, you ask questions and seek to understand the change and seek to adapt rather than just objecting and ignoring right away. Those who do ultimately not change, again, this is Darwin's theory of evolution. If you're unable to change, you're eventually left behind, you die. And so unfortunately, employees who are not flexible are not likely to be retained within the organization, and they are likely to be killing their own careers. Another anonymous attendee asks if that people are his priority, and how do you handle the current situation, keeping them? What would be your first action? And again, I think, thank you for the question. Our first action, like I said, is to have a lot of communication. And then the second one is to actually determine which of the people is the priority. Once you've determined which people are the priority, because not all people in your organization will be the priority. We all have inefficiencies in our organization. The question about, for those people who are a priority, is how do you manage cash flow to continue to keep them in the organization? And I have found that people who are a cultural fit, if you are communicating transparently to them, and if they know the situation clearly, will be willing to make compromises. So in other words, we as a company, again, we're privately held, but we publish to the whole company our financials on a very regular basis. And that means that every employee, from our janitor all the way up to our C-level, know how profitable or not, or how cash flow positive or not we are. And those that are great employees and want to continue to work in the company are willing to make the compromise in difficult times. Another question is an HR one that I got, that's should companies monitor the time each employee spends on their desk or trust works? So it's a great question. I'll tell you what we've done as opposed to saying what you should do, because I'm not sure what is the perfect answer. Our answer has been that we set objectives, both on the inputs and the outputs, and we monitor those. We don't monitor hours. So again, as part of our daily huddles, a relationship manager, a salesperson might say, listen, I'm going to do 20 calls today, and I'm going to generate one opportunity. Now, with our technology, we're able to monitor if 20 calls were made, and they report whether the opportunity happens. So we prefer to measure the outcomes than to measure if that took 8 hours or 16 hours. In the end of the day, all of our work and our ability to stay in our jobs is ultimately a function not of the hours we put in, but the outputs we produce. And so if someone is working 18 hours a day, but producing still 0 outcomes, that's almost irrelevant, to us at least. Akash Kumar, do you think the world way of working will change once we reopen? I am convinced of it, Akash. I think practically everything will change. And I think it's not that those themes weren't there, but they've accelerated. So, and in everything we do in life. So again, I told you I'm a shareholder and board member in a company called Mom's World. Mom's World is in the world of e-commerce. Mom's World was growing well before this crisis, but as a result of this crisis, everyone in the world is having to now shop online. And once we get a taste of shopping online, we all want to just shop online. It makes our life a lot easier. Similarly, with our virtual event platform, which is called vFairs, it used to be that we'd have very avant-garde companies saying, okay, instead of having a physical exhibition, I'll do a virtual exhibition. But today, because of this crisis, so many companies are having to try virtual exhibitions. And once they've tried it, they never want to go back. Remote work is going to become a thing that we're all a lot more used to. Contract labor. This concept of having people on iqamas sitting on desks, while it will still exist after this crisis, our dependence on it will reduce. And we will more and more hire people remotely and leverage technology to communicate and be efficient. An anonymous attendee. How can we intensify the sales team's performance given the current market crisis, which definitely affects our cash flow? That's a question that we are having to answer too. And I'll ask you to think about the following. It might be that no matter how much your salespeople try to sell today, it's impossible for them to sell. So again, if we go back to the retail example, if all the retail stores are closed, you're not going to be able to intensify that sales team's performance. So the next question should be, okay, that opportunity no longer exists. What else can I use those people for? And are there great opportunities out there that I can leverage them for? I heard, and I don't know if it's valid or not, but for example, that Al-Futtaim chose to take a lot of their retail staff and other support staff and leverage them to make deliveries for Carrefour, which is now getting extraordinary demand for e-commerce. So again, can you repurpose those teams to other things? And I think the role of leadership and the role of everyone in the organization is to think, what can I do now to best use my time and my resources? Hikmat Harmoush asks, talking about people first, what are the best measures to take during the crisis to keep the productive team members motivated, in the same time to manage the cash flow, which has been affected tremendously? So Hikmat, again, and I'll go back to the basic principle is if you want to keep people motivated, show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel and show them success. I mean, it's impossible to motivate people if there's no hope or there isn't a great story. Daily huddle, and we're doing this twice a day with good news. What good things have happened today? And that sharing of good news has been very helpful in keeping motivation high. It also serves to teach people how to replicate each other's success. So let's say one of our sales guys in Saudi was able to sell a new product which no one had sold before. Once the rest of the offices hear about that, then their peers in Dubai, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Kuwait all want to replicate that. So I think it's very important every day to ask everyone for positive feedback and to have that communication be open. Thomas asks about how to engage with their customers when their businesses are closed. And Thomas, again, we're having to deal with the same situation. And I don't know to what extent you have a CRM, but over the years, we've built a a massive database of all the customers that we've transacted with, as well as their contact details. And we find, again, speaking to a customer now, to check in is one way of being engaged, just on a human level. I am finding that my phone calls are being answered more rapidly today than they ever have been answered. So it's rare these days when I call someone that I have to wait beyond one ring. And then once I'm on the call and I check in on someone, the conversation gets brought into what are the things you think we could do to serve you better? What are you thinking of doing? And we try and ideate opportunities together. So this is the part of the business where you have to go into offense. And again, my suggestion, Thomas, is you need to decide which side of the business you're going to be on. Is it the defensive side or the offensive side? It's going to be difficult to do both. So decide, are you worried about preserving cash flow today, or are you the person worried about generating new opportunity? Ideally, that should be two separate people. Srinivas Singh asks, how to engage with ground staff who is not on system? What to do when they can't work from home? So I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me, the way I do understand that is, for example, we have janitorial staff at Bayt, we have drivers at Bayt, we have some blue collar workers. And so that I'm assuming is the ground staff who's not on the system. And those people, like the janitor or the driver, can't work from home. How do I engage with them? I actually still make it a point to call these people and check in on them. And you're realizing, again, my point with a lot of this, and you might think this is highly inefficient, but my point is you need to be having a ton of conversations. And I guess testament to the fact that it's not a bad theory is we've survived for 20 years by having a lot of conversation, and not only survived, but grown and become a multinational organization. In fact, we're a company that exports into the US market. Our vFairs platform primarily sells into the US, where we're primarily selling to Fortune 500 companies and the top global universities. And so it is the role of leadership to have very regular conversations with everyone. Another attendee asks, which costs did you cut or save during this period? So we immediately, when this crisis happened, we started off by cutting a bunch of our costs. Obviously, travel got cut right away, and that's by virtue of the fact that we couldn't travel. We scaled back our marketing costs significantly in some of our business because we realized that marketing would be wasted at this time. We stopped our hiring immediately, any new hiring. We put some of the staff that was on probation that we realized would unlikely succeed in their probation. We ended their probation periods. And we spoke to our landlords and we asked them for rental breaks. And we've actually gotten quite a few rental breaks from landlords already. We also went down every item on our P&L, literally item by item, and said, where can we scale back? And as I mentioned earlier, we realized, for example, we had a whole bunch of technology that we were still paying licenses for that we no longer needed. We cut that off. So it was a great time for us to reassess what we actually need and what we don't need. GV Rao asks, I'm a corporate trainer and I still work about 10 hours a day at home, preparing and working on my pending tasks. How do you think I should distribute that 10 hours, considering that I want to take advantage of the current situation as an opportunity? Yeah, it's a great question, and time management is challenging for all of us right now. Unfortunately, Mr. Rao, I don't know your personal situation, so not easy for me to say. But what I do recommend very strongly is a discipline about setting certain times for certain tasks. So in other words, if you feel like it is important to free up some time every day to look for new opportunities, then I would schedule that into the calendar and treat it like a meeting with a third person, which is to say, 9 hours of my day are going to be my regular work, but every day from 8 till 9 in the morning or at night, that's going to be just me reading, learning, exploring new opportunities, or speaking to customers to hear feedback from them. The last question I'll take is by an anonymous attendee. Because we're running out of time, I apologize. And I thank you all for the questions. There's still a bunch of other questions. Unfortunately, just from a time perspective, I won't be able to handle them. Is how often should town halls be conducted? There is no rule of thumb here. Our feeling is at the worst case, they should be done once a month. I've seen organizations very efficiently, and these are some huge global organizations, run them once a week, and I've seen others run them twice a week. And these are companies that are many times the size of Bayt.com. I found for me the town halls take a lot of time to prepare, and they're hard work, and they oftentimes bring up a lot of contentious issues. And so I find that the once a month frequency is sufficient for us. I want to thank you all for your time. My contact details were on the presentation. The email is ra@bayt.net. Should you need to reach out to me, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'll be happy to answer further questions. And I want to thank DMCC for setting this up. It's been a great pleasure. I'm going to leave a little also sort of selling tag at the end. At Bayt right now for this crisis, we have put up a whole bunch of free recruiting tools. And so again, if any of you are interested at this time to still look at new talent or to upgrade, this is an opportunity to do it for the first time ever at no cost. So, you know, again, if you're interested in those, also feel free to email me about that.
Thank you very much, Rabea, and thank you everyone for joining today. For any questions which were not answered, please feel free to directly reach out to Mr. Rabea and his team. And if you're interested in joining one of our upcoming webinars, please visit and register on our website, dmcc.ae/events. So this is the end of this webinar. Thank you again for joining, everyone. Have a nice day. Stay home and stay safe.